To fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet. Then we can go ahead and get started. As is usually the case, we have to wait until YouTube gets alive and well because sometimes it just takes a little bit longer than some of the other platforms. But it looks like we're almost there, and I think we can go ahead and press that button and then get started. So let me just swap that screen and we'll rock and roll. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. Throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice, and it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today because we've got a lot to get into. We've been following the Governor Andrew Cuomo kerfuffle taking place out of New York. Today, a 168-page report just dropped by somebody else we followed a lot here on the channel, Letitia James, the New York Attorney General. And so we're going to break into this story. We got a lot of documents to go through. We're going to take a look at just a couple of the alleged victims that apparently were under the hands, literally, of Governor Cuomo, specifically Anna Ruck. We also have an executive assistant, and there was another woman named Charlotte Bennett that have all sort of been in the media, and we're going to see what the AG report has to say about them. And we also have Governor Cuomo's response. So this is actually a lot of fun. He put out this 15-minute response, and it's actually very good. So we're going to sort of do this compare and contrast. We're going to show you what the problems are, or according to New York Attorney General Letitia James, and we're also then going to see what Andrew Cuomo has to say sort of as a rebuttal as we work our way through it. So that's going to be fun. Then we're going to change gears and talk about a very sensitive topic here, of course, suicide, specifically relating to the Capitol Hill Police, the DC Metro Police, law enforcement that was responding to January 6th. Another 2 officers revealed to have died by suicide. So this stuff, this is a story that sort of touches me personally. Some of you know, or some of you don't. But I lost my younger brother to suicide back in 2016. And so when I hear stories like this, it sort of rings the bell for me. And it got me thinking about some of the other stuff that I know about suicide. And so I want to go through that story. We're going to learn about the officers. There are now 4 of them who have all died by suicide. We have officers Dre Fatag, we have Hashida, we have Smith, and we have another guy, Liebengood. They're all no longer with us. And so we're going to talk about that story. We're going to talk about it in the context of suicide. Is this a suicide cluster, or what is happening here? Because we've always had a lot of questions about January 6th. We're going to break into that story delicately because this is obviously a very sensitive subject. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the eviction moratorium because Cori Bush is still out there, almost an insurrection type of activity, but on the Capitol Hill steps, saying that we want change, we want action from our elected officials because something like 7 million people under the Joe Biden administration are about to be thrown out on the streets because the eviction moratorium is expiring. And so we're going to take a look at that. Kind of a fun story. We're going to get to see some tears, very genuine tears from Cori Bush. And so put on your empathy pants, everybody, because we have to empathize with Miss Cori Bush. So we've got a lot to get into. If you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And you can also support us over on YouTube by dropping in a super chat over there. And if that happens, you'll see something like this pop up on the screen. It'll show you just right there. It'll say, hey, look, we got a super chat. So that came in from yesterday. There is a form over if you're a supporter at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Looks just like this. And you'll be able to ask your questions over there. There's a private link so you can use that form. All right. So let's get into to the stories of the day without any further ado. Let me make sure that my screens are queued up, and let's get into it. Governor Andrew Cuomo, he's been in some hot water for a long time with allegations of sexual harassment coming out of his office. We've seen a lot of the photographs. Very handsy gentleman, or not, somebody who is a governor in a position of power, and allegedly over the last years, decades, he was being very handsy with people who worked for him. And so this has been an ongoing problem. And we've gone through a lot of these different allegations from many of the different victims who have sort of come forward and made their claims. And what happened with all of it? Where'd it go? Kind of got swept under the rug. Kind of funny. But now, Attorney General Letitia James, she's back on it. We spent a lot of time talking about Letitia James, so we're not going to do much of a recap on her, but a quick recall. She was the same attorney general who sort of went after the Rochester police. Remember, the Rochester police were the same police agency that pepper sprayed that I think she was 14-year-old African-American girl. Also the same police force that sort of did that body plank on Daniel Prude for about 2.5 minutes, collapsed his entire head, neck in on it itself, and then he died later in the hospital. And so some problems going on with the Rochester police. Letitia James, she did this big investigation, wrote a big fat stinking report that had nothing in it other than it was like a book report. She just went through and said, hey, this is what happened, and the character gave this to somebody else. And so many of us were scratching our heads and saying, so what? What are you going to do about it? You have this going on in your state. You're the attorney general. Can you fix it or not? And so nothing really came of that. And so now we've got a new report out. It's something like another 168 pages of a book report from the New York Attorney General going after Cuomo. And so we're going to go into this. I've got a couple clips. The way that I want to break down this segment, we're going to hear from Letitia James, and then we're going to start to go through the report. As I mentioned, it's 168 pages, so we're not going to go through it entirely. But I have some clips, some excerpts from a couple of the key alleged victims that we are going to take a look at. And then we're going to compare and contrast that, because Governor Cuomo came out and he gave us his response and basically said, I'm not doing anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong, dang it, and I'm not stepping down. And here's some evidence to back that up. So we're going to show you that as well. So without any further ado, let's hear from Miss Letitia James before we start getting into some factual review and some analysis here. Here she is today, and I want to just kind of walk you through this very solemn, very somber event. Watch what happens here as she takes the stage, right? And there's a big sort of lead up to this. Very, very serious. Here we can hear her now. Going to be addressing the media.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes.
I'm joined here today by Ann Clark and June Kim, the two lead attorneys who were designated as special deputies to the Attorney General's office to announce the findings of their investigation into allegations of sexual harassment made against Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Yes.
I'll make a brief statement and then turn it over to Ms. Clark and to Mr. Kim, who will delve into the investigation's findings.
Yes, go ahead. We're ready.
The independent investigation has concluded.
Yes.
That Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed multiple women.
What?
And in doing so violated federal and state law.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
Specifically, the investigation found that Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed current and former New York State employees by engaging in unwelcome and non-consensual touching and making numerous offensive comments of a suggestive and sexual nature that created a hostile work environment for women.
All right, okay. So there you go. So that's Letitia James, right? And it's the same stuff that we heard previously. Now, listen, I am not somebody who thinks that Andrew Cuomo is a saint or a savior or somebody that should escape culpability here. He's obviously not an estimable man, right? Clearly, we've seen that from all of the allegations that come out. But we also got to be very careful here, right? We've seen this sort of this sword of claims of sexual harassment be used all over the country for all sorts of different people. And it sort of wiped people off or attempted to wipe people off of the board many, many times. Specifically, I'm talking about Judge Kavanaugh, right? Judge Kavanaugh was somebody who, they brought out these 30-year-old sexual harassment, sexual, assault allegations, and They tried to stop him from getting on the Supreme Court as a result of this. And so you can easily see how all of these sexual assault allegations, sexual harassment allegations can be turned into political weapons. It happens all the time. And it happens on both sides of the aisle, right? Both parties are responsible for this. The Democrats wanted to do it with Donald Trump with the grab him by the, whatever thing. And the Republicans were doing it with creepy Joe Biden, sniffing kids and stuff like that. So, right, it goes both ways. And the important part that I want to be sure that we're clear on here is that if they're going to bring in the legal system on these allegations, they better have some evidence and they better put their money where their mouth is, and they better be able to justify the claims. I do not like political smears from anybody if it's going to sort of lead to criminal charges. The politicization of our justice system is abhorrent and it should never happen. This woman, Letitia James, is a political actor. We already know that, right? And so I'm not here trying to defend Cuomo, but we got to know who we're talking about and ask ourselves about the veracity, the credibility of the report that's coming out of her office. This is the same woman that we've talked about on the channel who said specifically that she was running for office to go and prosecute Donald Trump, right? She campaigned on that, and she has that weird facial thing. She gets so animated when she's talking about Donald Trump that she starts, that illegitimate president is something that she did. We played that clip here like 5 times. It's hysterical. She can't contain her face because it is so, she's so passionate about removing Donald Trump. So it's the same person, right? Somebody with a political vendetta, somebody who is, feigning this neutral arbiter of justice as the New York Attorney General when she's anything but. It's not even remotely close. She prosecutes her political enemies. She campaigns on it. And we all know, you can sort of speculate where this is going, that she's running for governor at some point. And so how effective, how convenient that she's just going to simply remove the biggest impediment to her succeeding into the governor's mansion, which is her toughest opponent, Andrew Cuomo. So her office comes out and they release a 168-page report, which we are going to go through. I am not trying to defend Cuomo, right? He's a garbage human being, no question about it. In my opinion, the bigger issue with Cuomo is the fact that he murdered arguably manslaughtered thousands of New York senior citizens, right? So that is not being investigated by the DOJ. The sexual harassment stuff, though, we're making a big deal about it. So we got to keep our eye on the ball here. And the bigger question that I have is, what are they going to do about this? So what, Letitia James? So keep this in mind as we go through this analysis. Are you going to be recommending criminal charges? Are you going to send this over to a grand jury so that they can move forward and determine whether there's probable cause for further criminal charges? Are you endorsing civil lawsuits against Cuomo? Do you think that he should be impeached? Are you demanding his resignation? Do you think that he should be censured or admonished from some whatever organization? So what? What are we going to do about this next? Because Governor Cuomo, as much of a piece of work as that guy is, he's still entitled to due process and the presumption of innocence. And the state has the burden here. So if the government's going to come out, and it is right now, the New York Attorney General, and they're going to make these claims, they better be substantive. Because right now, well, we can go through it and then you can make the judge of this. We've seen a lot of the prior claims, inappropriate touching or stupid, disgusting, perverted comments from him. But does that, elevate to criminality? And was this sort of stuff that everybody knew about and just, allowed to happen under the radar until Cuomo became no longer useful anymore? And so then we start to see this political prosecution bubble up in order to remove an unwanted actor from the board. So there's a lot of questions I have about this. Let's see what the actual report here says. So first and foremost, this is the title page. Released August 3rd, as we see here. And Letitia James came out and she was referencing these other 2 people here, Ann Clark, Yannick Grant, coming out of the state of New York Attorney General's office. And you notice it's a big report, 168 pages. So again, not going to go through it in its entirety, but we can take a look at the table of contents. This is where they get their authority to do this. This is the procedure that they're going to follow. And then here are some factual findings. So they're just going to go through all the documents or all the different claims. And we're not going to focus on all of them. You can see there are a lot of them. State entity employee 1, employee 2. We got Caitlin. We have Anna Liss. We have Alyssa McGrath. Lindsay Boyland, a lot of them, right? A lot of different names here. We're going to be focused on executive assistant number 1. We're going to spend some time talking about Charlotte Bennett. And then we have Anna Ruck down here, who doesn't seem like she was an actual employee, but this was the woman whose picture was sort of spread all around the internet. Very problematic picture. So they're also talking about the governor and his response, which we're going to get into, the culture and the practice of the executive chamber, relevant law, and then we have the investigation's conclusions. The governor engaged in conduct that constituted sexual harassment. Okay, under federal law and state law. So you're going to File charges, or what are you going to do? The executive chamber failed to investigate allegations. So, right, what are you going to make recommendations on that? The executive chamber handling of Charlotte Bennett's complaints, they've got problems with that, along with other complaints. All right, and they have a problem with the culture over there. They give us a conclusion, which we're going to check into. So, again, it's a very giant book report, 168 pages. Is anything going to happen here? We already know. There's no spoiler here. Governor Cuomo is not resigning, right? He hasn't resigned thus far. He's not going to be resigning here, and we'll see where this goes. Let's take a look now. The way that I wanted to break this down, we're going to hear from Letitia James. Then we're also going to hear from Governor Cuomo. We got a rule here on this channel as well that if allegations are being made, or if one party is making a motion, if they're moving, in this case, Letitia James is saying, you, Governor Cuomo, are a sexual harasser. She's got the burden. She's got to bring all the evidence, and the evidence that she brings, because we're sort of viewing this, we want to sort of be as neutral as we can. We want to view this in a light most favorable to Cuomo. So let's say Cuomo's the defendant here. These accusations are being made his direction. Let's look at it in that regard. And again, we're asking ourselves, so what? Letitia James, you got 168 pages of documents. So what? Is anything else going to happen here? Criminal charges, civil suits? Are you going to turn this over to some, advisory board, some oversight committee somewhere, or not? Here she gives us an introduction. This is the executive summary. So this is a high-level overview of what we've got going on here. The investigators who've been appointed to investigate Cuomo conclude the governor engaged in conduct constituting sexual harassment under federal law and New York state law, which is a big claim. So she now has causes of action under those claims. Specifically, we find he sexually harassed a number of current and former state employees, among other things, engaging in unwelcome and non-consensual touching, as well as making numerous offensive comments of a suggestive and sexual nature, created a hostile work environment for women, right? So that sounds like very specific language that Letitia James is using in order to enable them to bring claims under a sexual harassment statute. Our investigation revealed that the governor's sexual harassing behavior was not limited to members of his own staff, also included other state employees, as well as a state trooper on protective detail. We also conclude that the culture is filled with fear and intimidation, frequent flirtations, gender-based comment, sexual harassment occurs and persists, and all of the follow-ups to this have been improper and inadequate. So in other words, we're making all these claims to the governor's office. We've seen multiple people complain about this, and they're not doing anything to respond. Their responses are inadequate and they're improper. So that's sort of the introduction. That's what Letitia James is saying is going on. Let's see what Andrew Cuomo has to say. He took to the cameras today, and this is his response.
I want you to know directly from me that I never touched anyone inappropriately or made inappropriate sexual advances.
Is it Bill Clinton?
I am 63 years old. I've lived my entire adult life in public view. That is just not who I am. And that's not who I have ever been.
All right. He's a 60-year-old man, folks. Not who I am, not who I've ever been, right? A lot of that same stupid language that we hear all the time, that's just not who we are as America. We're better than that, America. That's just not in our soul. We hear that all the time. Well, I don't know. Okay, so that's his claim. I don't do that. That's not who I am. He's got a pretty good little video point here, some video evidence that we're going to get into near the end of this segment. But let's see what some more of the allegations are. We got Letitia James says you're a sexual harasser. He says, no, I'm not. This is the governor's evidence. Here's where she starts. I'm sorry, this is the evidence against the governor. Sexual harassing conduct. We've got a number of different people that we can jump in and take a look at, but we're going to start off by taking a look at executive assistant number 1. And this is fairly recent too, okay? This is late 2019, and this is after Harvey Weinstein. Remember, Harvey Weinstein was back in 2017. And so sort of the game kind of changed after that, right? The whole Me Too movement and all of this sort of, report. If anything like this is problematic, everybody was reporting everything, even if it seemed like it was, a stretch. So that's my first question is, why does this stuff take so long to come out these days? But of course, what do I know? I'm a white male. So we have the governor engaged in a pattern of inappropriate conduct with his executive assistant, who is a woman. Pattern of conduct included close and intimate hugs, kisses on the cheeks, forehead, and at least one kiss on the lips. touching and grabbing of her butt during hugs on one occasion while taking selfies with him. Comments and jokes by the governor about executive assistant's personal life and relationships, including calling her and another assistant mingle mamas. And so, when you hear words like that, you know that that's true, right? You know that somebody said that at some point, because mingle mamas, that's just like too good. You can't make that up. That's too good to be fictional. That's something that is real. Mingle mamas, including multiple times about whether she cheated or would cheat on her husband or help him find her a girlfriend, right? Totally inappropriate, not okay. Clearly, a butt touch during a hug, yeah, that would be assault in most cases. And so, the question is, why wasn't that reported, or what happened here? Offensive interactions culminated in an incident in a mansion in November 2020, so late 2019. The conduct started, goes all the way, sounds like over a year, to November 2020 during another close hug. So this woman keeps hugging him, apparently. Reached under her blouse and grabbed her breast for a year. For over 3 months, she kept this groping incident to herself, planned to, quote, take it to the grave, but found herself becoming emotional while watching the governor deny. She confided in other colleagues who then reported it to the executive chamber. So, all right, so got it. So we have somebody here, that's what we're talking about, right? It's a different category of, it's not Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein was raping women. This is not okay. I'm not endorsing this, but it is not the same thing, right? It's a whole different thing. And this was something that lasted for a year, didn't report anything. And so the question is why? If you're a defendant, if you're a defense attorney, you're saying, okay, well, it sounds like you were sort of engaging in a lot of this, inappropriate jokes, all of these different things, and then something flipped and it was no longer appropriate. So that's how you would frame that. You would say, well, this was all sort of consensual, mutual stuff, inappropriate, sure, but I'm the governor of New York and we do things inappropriate here. And so whatever, right? That's their culture, and he can make excuses for that, as we will see him continue to do. But it's also, right, it's mingle mamas and hugs and butt touches, and we have an under the blouse touch of the nipple. I think I'm not sure if we can confirm that or not. A nipple touch, I don't know, but that's where you start to get into some of those assault charges that have a sexual connotation in nature when you start talking about breasts and things like that. Okay, executive assistant number one. That's what we've got. Charlotte Bennett now. Governor Cuomo responds to this one specifically. He says, listen, I know a lot of you are mad about Charlotte Bennett, and so I got to address that specifically. Let's see what Letitia James has to say and complain about this one. Says, in a series of conversations in 2020 with an aide, Charlotte Bennett, the governor made inappropriate comments. Again, talking about girlfriends for him, right? So he's got a bad joke or something like that. Inappropriate, not endorsing it. Willing to date someone who was as young as 22 years old. He knew that she was 25 at the time, right? Perverted, just, not appropriate. Asking her whether she wanted to be with older men. Saying during the pandemic that he was lonely and wanted to be touched, right? Asked whether Bennett was monogamous. Telling her that, talk about a tattoo, she should get it on her butt. Asking her if she had any piercings. Saying she wanted to ride his motorcycle into the mountains with a woman. Comments all came from the governor, and they're confirmed in text message exchanges that Bennett had with others, followed and coincided by discussions about the government with the governor about her having been a survivor of sexual assault. It made her extremely uncomfortable. Made her so uncomfortable that she told his chief of staff about it in June 2020. And remember this case? We talked about this one. It's coming back to me now. We talked about this. This was when she was actually working for him. They developed this relationship. After a long period of time, it gets uncomfortable. So she says, this is not appropriate. So I go to the governor's chief of staff. She says they moved her to a different position where she would not have to deal with the governor anymore. Did not report the allegations. State agency tasked with conducting an investigation did not follow that up. And senior staff, they instead implemented a rule where women were not to be left alone with the governor. So nobody reports any of this stuff. This is taking place in the executive branch, by the way. Right. So all of these people are supposed to be like public servants fighting for the little people out there. And they have a policy where they're keeping women away from the governor. OK. All right. So let's see what Governor Cuomo has to say about this. And I could be mistaken about that, Charlotte Bennett, but I think the move was sort of a promotion. Didn't they move her to like an environmental agency or something like that? It was like it was not just a lateral move. She actually got promoted or something. And so at the time we were saying, well, that doesn't make much sense. So she's very offended about the sexual harassment, but then he gives her a promotion. No problem. I'll take that. No problem at all. Happy to do that. Here is Governor Cuomo now talking about it.
There is one complaint that has been made that bothered me most. That was a complaint made by a young woman, Charlotte Bennett, who worked in my office. And it's important to me that you fully understand the situation. Charlotte worked in my office last year as an assistant. She was smart, talented, and eager to learn. She identified herself to me as a survivor of sexual assault. She said that she came to work in my administration because of all the progress we had made in fighting sexual assault. She talked about the personal trauma that she endured and how she was handling it.
Yeah.
I could see how it had affected her.
Yes,
I could see her pain.
Yes, that's true. Yes, we know. We know you could see her pain. Yes, because you were the person who was assaulting her, right? So she goes through it. He's making her extremely uncomfortable, but you see how he's reframing this. He's saying, oh, no, she's a sexual assault survivor. And so we were talking about sexual things. And, you know, I just wanted to help. And the emotions got the better of me. I'm not a predator at all. And you know, I'm somebody who's trying to help. And I probably shouldn't have gotten so close to somebody and talked about those issues. So poor Cuomo, you know, he just gets caught up in these things. He's just a misunderstood, creepy, you know, governor, and everybody was letting this all slide for a very long time until he no longer became useful. So, all right, we've got one more person we got to talk about here in Cuomo's reign of destruction. You remember this photo? This one was one that caught a lot of attention. Very, very horrendous photo. And so you're going to see, now I will tell you this, what Governor Cuomo does here is actually quite masterful. Watch what happens here. So we're going to spend some time on this. This woman's name is Anna Ruch, R-U-C-H or Ruch, I'm not sure. This took place on September 14, 2019. So some time ago. And you're going to notice that we have a couple little, interesting things going on, right? This woman over here, sort of shocked at what's going on. Don't know if she's responding to the Cuomo grab. This woman over here is also very shocked, going, what the heck is going on over here? And then this woman, you can see, Anna is clearly disturbed, right? You can see that in her face. It does not look comfortable at all. Looks like she's sort of paralyzed with fear. I actually have a lot of empathy for her here. Looks very uncomfortable. Right, totally inappropriate. What he's doing now also looks very predatory, right? He's sort of got that lip furrowed underneath his upper lip there, just sort of like salivating, like, oh, I like what I see, or something like this, right? Very disgusting image. You can sort of see what is going through his mind, and it's disgusting and reprehensible. So let's go through and now talk about what happened here. And I want to show you what Governor Cuomo does. Very, very skilled. I'm not endorsing his conduct, but the way he's responding to this is quite good. Before we get there, let's talk about what Letitia James says. She says, back on September 14th, there was a wedding party. One of Governor's senior aides approached a guest. Her name was Anna Ruch, shook her hand, and then quickly moved his hands to her back, touching her bare skin. There was a cutout. Miss Ruch, feeling uncomfortable, grabbed the governor's wrist, removed his hand from her back. At that point, the governor remarked, wow, you're aggressive. After which the governor cupped her face in his hands and said, can I kiss you? Without waiting for a response, Ms. Ruch tried to move and turn her face away. The governor kissed her left cheek. Pictures taken by her friend captured the governor's kiss and Ms. Ruch's uncomfortable reaction, right? And that was that right there. So apparently he went over there, moved his hands to her back, touched her bare skin. She doesn't like it. He says, you're aggressive. Can I kiss you? And then we see what happens here. Right. So that's the rest of that. Now, Governor Cuomo, this is, I don't know if we talked about this last time, the last time we covered Miss Ruch's case, but he put together something that is pretty effective. Let's see if you buy it. The question is for you locals and YouTube. What do you think about this? Do you buy this explanation? Here is Governor Cuomo. Why, Governor Cuomo? Why did you do that to Miss Ruch, to Anna Ruch? Why did you put your hands on her face like that? We want answers.
I've been making the same gesture in public all my life. I actually learned it from my mother.
Oh, look at that.
And from my father. It is meant to convey warmth, nothing more. Indeed, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of photos of me using the exact same gesture.
Watch.
I do it with everyone, black and white, young and old, straight and LGBTQ, powerful people, friends, strangers, people who I meet on the street. After the event, the woman told the press that she took offense at the gesture. And for that, I apologize.
Whoa, that's pretty good. Pretty good there, Cuomo and legal counsel, whoever's working on that case. Pretty good, pretty effective. And remember, right, he's not trying to win you or me. He's not trying to bring us to his side. He knows he's lost us. We were all lost a long time ago. He is a creepy sexual predator, also somebody who's a narcissist and probably a sociopath as well, who is very okay with sort of just, sending COVID-infected senior citizens back into senior centers where other high-risk senior citizens are living, resulting in the deaths of thousands of people. And he just continues on with his business like it's nothing. It's not even anything to bat your eye at. But what happened here, quite effective. He's going through and he's trying to win the people over who are on the fence a little bit, right? You and I are gone. We've left a long time ago. No love for the Cuomo train at all. But what about the people in New York, the people who say, well, he did a pretty good job here and we're still watching CNN and reading the New York Times and we still kind of like the guy. What does he have to say? He comes out, he says, look, my mom grabbed me like this. My mom put her hands on my neck and my face. This is a symbol of love, of affection. And he goes around and he shows you Robert De Niro, Al Gore, and many of the other people in there. Not a lot of other 25-year-old younger women in wedding dresses in social events. We didn't see many of those other pictures that his team went and unearthed for us, but I'm guessing that they're out there. And Letitia James, her report actually details a lot more other victims. I think there's probably 7 or 8 or 10 other victims. And so the question, as I started out with at the beginning of this segment, so what? What happens? What are they going to do about it? Anything? Let's take a look at the conclusion here from Miss James. She says, upon completion of our independent investigations and the circumstances, we've reached the conclusion that he sexual harassed a number of people. We find this conduct and this pattern happen with others outside of state government as well. Okay, great. We also find that the chamber's response is also not appropriate. And in fact, it constitutes unlawful retaliation. And we conclude that the culture of fear and intimidation, blah, 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 contributed to the sexual harassment and overall hostile work environment in the executive chamber. That's it, folks. That's it. That's the end of the document. There's nothing left. That was page 168 or whatever. There's nothing else. So she wrote us a big book report, a big summary of what she found. She's the New York Attorney General. She could refer this over to a number of different agencies to move forward with legal action. But she's not. Maybe she will later. I doubt it. Is anything going to come of this? I doubt it. Other than she's going to have a big dossier, a big file that she can refer back to when she runs for governor later down the line. So not a lot of new information here, kind of the same stuff. Cuomo's a creep show, no question about it. But is that going to be the end of him? In fact, he kind of doesn't even care about it. He was posting on Twitter. He's back to COVID already. So he posted this at 10:30 this morning after the report, after his response. He said, hey, here are the updates on the numbers. There were 5 people who got killed from COVID. So we're going to lock down everything again. That's Governor Cuomo. What's the media going to do with it? Anything? All right. What do you think about this? Let's take some questions quickly over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And then we'll also see if anything came in from YouTube. Not looking like it, but let's see what's coming in over here. Oh, you've been signed out. Okay. Let me figure this one out, folks. Let's see if I can make an adjustment on the fly. For some reason, my form is not up to date. So now I have to take a look at this button. All right, let me make sure this screen is not showing anything publicly. I apologize for the little delay over here, but for some reason it logged me out. I thought I had this figured out. All right, so we've got responses coming in. And over here, queuing these up, folks, we've got A lot of questions coming in hot. Okay, so Cuomo's sexual harassment. All right, we're back in business. Let's see here. Sorry about that, folks. All right. Angel Blair is in the house on the Cuomo sexual harassment question. First one up is Angel Blair says, the left eats its own. What do you think of the ultimate outcome will be given your background in law and then from a context of your knowledge of government malfeasance? So I honestly, I don't think that anything's going to come of this with Cuomo. If you're asking about criminal charges, are they going to actually charge him criminally? On the face of it, I see some stuff that might be criminal, right? Certainly, if he is inappropriately touching a woman on her breast or really any inappropriate touching without consent could be an assault charge in a number of different ways. And if you have contact with, genitals or somebody's buttocks or somebody's, nipple, then that might be even more problematic. They can sort of take those out of a regular assault charge and shift those into a higher level offense that has some sexual connotation to it. And so I'm not a lawyer in New York, of course, but I'm going to guess that Letitia James could easily go through with a lot of these allegations and come up with enough probable cause to support filing a direct complaint, filing charges specifically, or at least enough to turn this over to a grand jury. My question then is, if she's got enough, if she's going to write a 168-page report, why is this not already with a grand jury? Maybe it is, right? Maybe all this is taking place behind the scenes, and maybe this was sort of the first domino in a long list of other dominoes. And so I could be premature. I am cognizant of that, right? There could be more that is coming, but I'm doubtful that there will be, because a lot of this stuff just doesn't rise to that level of felony criminal prosecutions. Weinstein, absolutely, right? He was like literally raping women and threatening them all sorts of horrendous things, which are clearly criminal. But in a lot of these situations, it's kind of a he said, she said thing in many of them. And so, I'm not a, hashtag believe all women person. And so Governor Cuomo is going to get the same due process and the same ability to defend himself that I would want any person in this world to get, including Derek Chauvin, including you, including Donald Trump, or anybody else who's facing any allegations like this. And once his defense attorneys get in here, there's not enough here to substantiate really meaningful criminal charges, which is exactly why I think that Letitia James has not done anything with it. It's a political smear. That's essentially what this whole thing has been for a long time. And I don't say that, with glee, right? Cuomo's a terrible person. The DOJ is not investigating him for one of the biggest crimes of any elected politician in this country, or if not a crime, gross negligence to the point where maybe it in fact should be criminal. Because it was obvious that you should not send COVID-infected sick patients into nursing homes. That's insane. And he did it anyways. All right. I forgot Tuesdays are a little bit tight on time, so I got to pick up the pace on some of these. Kenny 1B says, Biden said Cuomo needs to resign. When your fellow groper says it, it's bad. Did he? I missed that. You know what Cuomo's going to say to this? So what? Not going anywhere. Why would he? He hasn't left yet. LT13 says the AG's dramatic reading of this was agonizing. She stretches out the S at the end of words, and it's over the top. Yeah, it's called chewing the scenery in Hollywood terms. We talk about that sometimes in the law, right? It's overacting, being melodramatic. Histrionics are some of the good synonyms for that. It is painful. It's clearly political. She knows it. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it. Peely Wally says, hey, Rob, is the way she talks about Cuomo not just slanderous? Can he take action against them if no crime is found to have happened or can't be proved? Just ruining names is a disgrace. So, he's a public figure. I think she's done enough due diligence here that if he tries to sue her for, defamation or slander or libel or anything like that, he's not going to succeed, because he's not going to be able to show that she did any of this with actual malice. This is all part of her duties as an elected official, the New York Attorney General. And so she's not going to be able to, Cuomo's not going to be able to show that this was done with any malintent, which he would need to show in order to be successful in a claim like that. CNN reported at least there wasn't any rapes involved, and Cuomo did say she wanted his job. I always like to hear another view. So CNN doing cover for him already? All right, maybe that's the case. We have John Halgreen is here, said James has weaponized her office, and as long as she remains the New York AG's office, and all of its actions will be tainted. Yeah, she is a political person first and foremost. We know that. And so I know it's easy to sort of spike the ball on Cuomo, and you're going to see that in a lot of other places. But she's she's a partisan hack, right? This is not justice. This is partisan hackery. We got to call it out when it is what it is. We have, what about all of the Cuomo sexuals? Are they going to face shame? Also, in that report, we were getting a verification of those nipple rings. Asking for a friend. Oh my gosh. When we were listening to Cuomo talk, I looked over here on YouTube and somebody commented that. They said basically, Sarah Brown said that they confirmed that the nipple rings are a thing. So we've got multiple corroborations between locals and between YouTube. I think it was Sarah Brown. Shout out Sarah Brown for confirming now we have unity amongst we are crossing the streams to confirm that Cuomo has nipple rings. And I think 2 of them, to be fair about that. Bill Clinton's here says, he should have taken some moves out of my playbook. Works every time. Bill's in the house. We have another one from Bumma Lickett. Says, if Cuomo resigns, who takes over his place? Do New York residents get to vote for a new governor to replace him? I don't know. I don't know how that works. Or if it's like a deputy governor, or if they would have a sort of a recall or a special election or something like that, sort of like what we see in California. Funny stuff. We got Hunter Biden's here. We got Bill, Hunter, all of the people are coming out of the woodwork. Says, I love them kids. I love watching cuties. My hard drive is full. My dad, Hunter Biden quote says, my dad loves sniffing kids, which we know because we've seen a lot of those photographs all over the internet. Thunder7 says, hey, Rob, James couldn't care less about sexual harassment. Dems are just covering for Cuomo's real crime, which was murdering the elderly in nursing homes. It was done to make Trump look bad. I'm sure Cuomo will be forced to resign and the Dems can whitewash what they did to kill elderly people in blue states. That's kind of a good, I think, catchphrase maybe for the Republicans, right? At least we're not murdering your parents. At least we're not murdering your grandparents. Vote for us. That's the Republicans. We've got DK Poor says, does Cuomo have immunity as a governor that protects him from prosecution pending the time in his tenure? And if so, can Miss James go after him after office for jail time or settlement? So if he, it's not total immunity when we're talking about government officials. It's called qualified immunity. And so as long as they're acting within the confines of their duties, then they're protected from that. So this would be a police officer, chasing somebody down, shoots and kills them. Well, it was questionable. Maybe shouldn't have pulled the trigger on that one, but it's questionable. So you're going to be protected because you have qualified immunity. But if you sort of exceed the scope of your employment, if you exceed your permissible, allowable, actions, well, then that pulls you out of qualified immunity. So in this case, the framework would be much the same. If Cuomo is found to have done something criminally outside of the purview of his role as governor, then that would breach that immunity, and he would be able to be prosecuted criminally, civilly, whatever. Across the board. We have Kareem165 says, seems to me when it comes to sexual accusations, men in general get convicted and put on the guillotine without ever getting a fair trial. Happens all the time. I've seen it happen many times, not on a national scale, but I'm talking about with our clients. Happens all the time. People lie all the time. They make up stuff for all sorts of different reasons. Happens very frequently. Todd Trout says, I'm older, so I'm not up to date with the new slang. What is a mingo mama? So I think it's a mingle mama. And quite frankly, I don't know what older means. I was going to say, I've never heard of a mingle mama either, but I'm not a 63-year-old man. So Todd, I don't know how old you are. If you're in your 50s or 60s, you would be sort of more closely aligned with Cuomo's generation. And I would expect you to know what a mingle mama is. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a New York thing. I don't know. New Yorkers out there, what are mingle mamas? I don't know what they are. And I'm not even going to have a follow-up comment to that because I was going to say something else about mingle mamas, but I'm not going to do that. We have John Halgreen is here, says police and fire suicide rates. Oh, wait, that's over to the next segment. So we'll get there. Let's cue that one up. I want to make sure I get to that one because that looks like a good one. Just give me a quick second, and we'll go to another question over here just so I can save that one so that we don't miss it. All right. Then we have a couple more on this topic. We have Screw Me Too says, the Me Too movement, very horrible movement, only used as a political weapon to extract resources. All Me Too allegations should not be deemed credible unless there is an immediate police report or overwhelming evidence such as a video recording. Regarding Andrew Cuomo as well, you can tell people who endorse me don't actually care Yeah, so allegations from Joe Biden, Tara Reade, don't take them seriously, so screw me too. Yeah, it's especially post Harvey Weinstein, right? Sort of there was, 2017, there's sort of pre-Harvey and then there's post-Harvey. I think post-Harvey, there are less and less excuses for delaying the reporting. You got to report. All right, so you've got to report that. Okay, so we've got another one from DK Poor says, you ever wonder how effective Miss James' office is to find the, quote, dirt on Cuomo within a year, but after over 3 years, still nothing for Trump, not found even a slap on the wrist? The illegitimate president, according to Mrs. James. There's nothing in there for Trump, and she should drop it now. Yeah, it's a good one. Let's see. I got to pick up the pace, folks, so sorry if I don't get to your question. It says, Rob, always takes a lawyer twice as long or longer to do an investigation when you're paying them hourly. Everything with court drags on too long. We don't take hourly rates here. Did you know that? We do flat fees here. So you don't have to worry about any of that hourly stuff. All right, so I got to move on to the next segment, so I apologize if I missed your question. There were a ton of those here, but as we know, Tuesdays, I have a little bit of a compressed time schedule. So we got to continue on moving on. I appreciate all of those and all of your support at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right, next segment. January 6th, Capitol Hill riots, protests, the insurrection, however you want to call it. Lot of damage is still working its way through our system. We have a lot of Capitol Hill defendants who are still being held in custody without being released on bond. We have now we have new information that 2 police officers died by suicide very recently. In fact, in July, just this past month, died by suicide, which brings the total number of Capitol Hill police who have died by suicide to 4. So it doubled with this new revelation. And so we're going to jump off with a headline from WUSA 9, which is based in D.C., in Washington. And then we're going to sort of analyze this framework by meeting these different officers. There were 4 of them. We have their names and images, and we're going to learn a little bit more about them. And we're going to ask ourselves this question: what is going on here? Why are we seeing a number of Capitol Hill police or DC Metro police, just Washington police law enforcement officers dying and dying by suicide? Many people know this. Some of you do not know this. I have a little bit of experience in this field because I lost my younger brother, 27 years old, back in 2016 to suicide after a long bout of a drug addiction that just could not be overcome. So he's no longer with us. And as a result of that, my family and I, my mom specifically, started ericshouse.org, which is a nonprofit organization where we help people who have lost somebody to suicide, overdose, or tragic deaths to recover and find some safety and some clarity in the process of losing somebody. So I have a little bit of experience in this field. I've been a part of men's groups. I've read books on this, listened to talks. I've listened to psychic mediums. I've done a lot of work in this space. So I have a little bit of insight on this. And so as we're going through this, I want to introduce you to this concept of what's called a suicide cluster. The idea here being that oftentimes if there's a traumatic event or something big that happens in our community, in our society, that you'll start to see these little explosions of suicides that go off. One person will die by suicide, and you'll see this domino effect that sort of permeates throughout that different locality. So we're going to talk about it in that context, because we have questions about this, and we have to be careful and cognizant about this. We're talking about people who are no longer with us. We're talking about a highly charged political issue that causes people to have a lot of emotions here. We want to make sure that we're respecting these officers and their families because they're no longer with us. And so there's going to be a lot of speculation about what happened here, right? Were these suicides? Should we be accepting these facially as suicides? Or was there some sort of unspoken pressure on these men that caused them to do this? Is this a result of the media? Is this a result of Donald Trump? Is this a result of some other unspoken force in our society that maybe we have to keep our eyes on? We have a lot of questions about what happened on January 6th. And this is an unusual thing happening. So as we go through the story, just a double down, a reminder on the sensitivity for the men and their families who are no longer with us. Let's see if we can get into this. We have the headline says that a 4th officer responded on January 6th, dies by suicide. We have Officer Kyle DeFreytag and we have Officer Gunther Hashida. Both died by suicide. Both defended the Capitol on January 6th. 4 law enforcement officers have now died by suicide. Sobering toll. Officer DeFreytag was in the city's 5th district on the Capitol. He was enforcing curfew violations, and D.C. Metro Police Chief Robert Conti, who we met earlier this week, yesterday, came out and said, "I am writing to share the tragic news of his death. This is incredibly hard news for us all." The confirmation came after another spokesman said that another officer, Gunther Hashida, was also found dead last Thursday. He was assigned to the department's emergency response team. So 4 officers, all by suicide, pretty much within the last 6 months. All right, so let's see if we can break down what's happening here. As I mentioned, there's a question or an idea. Is suicide contagious? Can it hit one person and then trickle out into other people, into other communities? The way that I learned about this is after my brother passed on, there was a big concern about that. People were saying hyper red alert with Rob, because people were speculating that maybe I might get that idea, or that maybe my mother might get that idea, or that this might spread throughout the family. So there was a little bit, high alert here. Brothers, sisters, family, siblings, they go. One suicide can often go into other suicides. Is that what's happening here? Is that what is happening with the Capitol Police as a result of January 6th? I don't know, but it's one place to jump off on. This is from the Center for Suicide Prevention. They tell us about this, suicide contagion. They also talk about suicide clusters. So as we go through here, we know that this has been studied. There are factors. There are different ways that we can analyze what's taking place here. Does this fit? Does suicide clusters or suicide contagion fit? I don't know. Let's see. What is suicide contagion? What is suicide clusters? It has long been believed that when suicide contagion occurs, a suicide cluster can develop. A cluster in this case is defined as multiple suicidal behaviors or suicides that fall within an accelerated time frame, and sometimes within a defined geographical area. Okay, so a couple things that might say, yeah, this is clearly what that is. Accelerated time frame. We're going to see here, I've got dates for all the 4 officers. They all happen within the last 7 months. An accelerated time frame, all within a defined geographical area, right? Washington, D.C., the Capitol Hill Police, and the D.C. Metro Police. But then we have something that really doesn't support it. Studies have shown that adolescents are the ones that are most affected. Okay, these are not adolescent, these are grown men. This comes from a study from Zanier in 2009. 2 types of clusters now with suicides. We have a mass cluster that involves suicide that cluster in time, irrespective of geography. So often associated with media reports like suicides by celebrities, right? Remember this when Robin Williams died? A lot of people were concerned about this. The happiest guy that everybody knew took his own life because he was so depressed. And the media was concerned that there might be a suicidal cluster. This might be contagious because everybody starts to say, if Robin Williams is not happy, maybe I'm not happy. And if he did it, maybe I should do it too. So it's concerning. That's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about point clusters, which involve suicides that are close in time or space. They often occur within institutional settings like hospitals, prisons, or schools, or within distinct communities. So that's what we're asking ourselves here. Is something going on here outside of this? Are there external pressures? Are people being blackmailed? Is there some nefarious conspiracy going on here? Or is this just suicide contagion and suicide clusters? We know that there are factors that are indicative of these things, of suicide clusters. Let's see if the officers fit. We're going to go through 4 of them, the 4 officers who are no longer with us. Let's see if they fit this model. First up, we have Officer Liebengood. You can see him here. He was the first officer to die by suicide. U.S. Capitol Police say they're deeply saddened. He's a 15-year veteran of the force. Deepest sympathies here to Liebengood's family. We mourn the death of a friend and colleague. Worked on the Capitol Hill for a long time. Started in April 2005, was assigned to the Senate Division. Was among the officers who responded to the rioting. Paid tribute to his service. Union chairperson came out, supported him, also supported Brian Sicknick, right? Also another officer, Marshall, who died January 2nd, 2021, fighting cancer. So the Capitol Police threw all them in there. They didn't throw in there Ashley Babbitt or her family or anything like that, but that's for a different video, isn't it? So that's Liebengood. Now, Liebengood was somebody who had some close proximity to some people in pretty high positions of power. You'll notice this. John Kerry said, "My deepest sympathies for the families of Capitol Hill police officers Brian Sicknick and Howard Liebengood." Howie, he calls him, was stationed next to one of our offices in the Russell building. Everyone from school groups to protesters entered and exited. Always had a smile on his face. Great care for the safety of the young staff. A tragic loss, Cori says. So here's Liebengood. Now, very interesting thing about Liebengood is his father actually was the sergeant of arms in the U.S. Congress. He left to become a lobbyist, started his own law firm. Then in 2001, he became the chief of staff to Fred Thompson. You may remember him from Tennessee. He ran for office some time ago, actually for president. Then he became the chief of staff to Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist, died of a heart attack in 2005. So Liebengood's father was chief of staff in Congress, right? Very, very close connections with very powerful people. The father has a successful career in politics as chief of staff. Son gets a job in the Senate division for the Capitol Hill Police. All right. He's got a family, we say, always had a smile on his face. Is this somebody who would be susceptible to a suicide cluster? He sees his fellow officer die. He decides that he's also going to die. What do you think about that? Next officer, Officer Smith. Jeffrey Smith is his full name. Now, he is no longer with us. Here's a picture of him with his wife. Coming from the Washington Post, they say that Officer Smith returned to the police clinic for a follow-up appointment on January 14th. You remember, just a short time after January 6th. Was ordered back to work, a decision his wife now questions. On January 15th, of course, after a sleepless night, he set off next afternoon for an overnight shift, taking the ham and turkey sandwiches, trail mix, and cookies that his wife Erin had packed for him. On his way to the district, Smith shot himself in the head. Okay. Police found him in his cherished Ford Mustang, which had rolled over down an embankment along the George Washington Memorial Parkway near a scenic overlook on the Potomac River. Wife, cherished Ford Mustang, young man, suicide. We're going to get his age and some other stuff here in a minute. We also have Kyle DeFreytag, confirmed on Monday by the D.C. police that he was also died by suicide, responded to the insurrection, member of the department since 2016, and DeFreytag's parents did not return a phone call seeking comment, right? Family is non-responsive. Now, the family being non-responsive, their son just died, right? So that's not to be unexpected. Final officer, Gunther Hashida, responded to the insurrection. Authorities drew no connection between the riot and his death. An official familiar with the investigation said that Hashida had struggles beyond January 6th that could have played a role. Okay, so struggles beyond January 6th. This is the first little, I haven't done an overly, deep dive on this, but the first information on any of these officers that there may be external problems could have played a role. We don't know. Fourth officer joined the D.C. police force in May 2003. Recently, he had been assigned as the department's tactical unit, called the emergency response team. He was in his early 40s, according to public records. A relative of Hashida declined to comment. Other family members also did not want to talk publicly. So we've got kind of an interesting spectrum here of 4 officers, different ages and different backgrounds and different family histories. I got them all summarized for us here on a chart. But before we take a look at the chart, let's take a look at this book, this study. There's a workshop that came out, and it's called The Contagion of Violence. This is actually part of a big book. And in section 2.4, they talk about the contagion of suicide behavior. PhD, MPH from Columbia University and the New York State Psychiatric Institute. What's going on here? Introduction. They tell us that evidence has accumulated to support the idea that suicide is contagious. Evidence comes from 3 bodies of research. The study on the impact of media reporting on suicide. So if the media reports about it, might see more suicides. Studies of suicide clusters, as well as impacts on adolescents of exposure to a suicidal peer. Okay. So again, in this study, it's adolescents. It's not grown police officers. While research has also addressed the distinct and related topic, this focuses on attempted and completed suicide. The impact of the media reporting on the suicide is big. Most research has addressed non-fictional reporting. It's shown to have a powerful effect. More than 50 studies show that non-fictional stories that are reported have yielded consistent findings. Suicide goes up following an increase about stories about suicide. Suicides go down when there's less suicide stories. So the question then is, well, are these police officers adolescents? Are they people who are going to be under exposure or peer pressure from the exposure of media reports on suicide? Maybe, I don't know. Let's take a look. Suicide clusters now, they studied this relatively in depth. We say clusters primarily occur among teenagers and young adults. Between 1% and 5% of teen suicides occur in clusters. So even then, it's a very small number. The clusters don't typically occur in adults, teenagers and young adults. And even then, 1% and 5% of the suicides actually occur in clusters. We had a case control study of two teen suicide clusters in Texas. They had close personal relationships with one another. Teens from the same community were not directly acquainted. They matched them. They say that suicide completers were more likely to have pre-existing vulnerabilities like emotional illness, substance abuse problems, frequent changes of residence, recent breakups, and so on. So, which of those factors apply to these four officers? Teenagers, young adults, well, close personal relationships. Did they work with each other? I don't know. We're going to see. Same community. They're certainly part of the same law enforcement community. Are they part of the same police department specifically? Did they have any of these other things? Emotional illness, substance abuse problems, frequent changes of residence, breakups, or anything like that? Probably not. Now, the media, interestingly, is sort of responsible for a lot of this. Research into the impact of the media has demonstrated an increase in suicide rates after stories about suicide. Already read that. Suicide rates go up. So when we summarize all of this, this is what it looks like. We have Liebengood, U.S. Capitol Police. We have Smith, U.S. Capitol Police. So you could say these two people were in close proximity with one another. However, Liebengood was in the Senate Division and Smith was a patrolman. So we don't really know, right? We don't really know if one had anything to do with the other. And Liebengood was on January 9th. Smith was on the 15th. So you could say that maybe, yes, maybe that there was a cluster here. That Liebengood, died and Smith died. He's married. He packed his lunch. He had a Mustang, was on the way to work, shot himself in the head. Car careened off of the side of the road. Liebengood, married, siblings, father was a lobbyist. Okay. Now we have DeFreytag. He's 26 years old. He's with a different police agency. He's with DC Metro Police over here. And he was out there sort of watching curfew violations. And then shortly thereafter, we had Ashita. He's part of the emergency response team. He's also part of the special ops division with DC Metro. Husband and father, leaves behind 3 children. These are also back to back, right? 7/10, July 10th over to July 29th. We have this cascade of deaths again. So, arguably, this could be one cluster of deaths that took place in the Capitol Police, and this could be another cluster of suicides that took place in DC Metro. But then you sort of ask yourself about these, right? You got 5-year veterans hanging out with 18-year veterans. I don't know, 15-year veterans with 12-year veterans from different divisions, Senate division over to the patrolman, 51 years old versus 35, 43 versus 26. This guy's got, married with kids. This guy's not 26 years old, obviously, still trying to figure a lot of life out. We all are still. And so does it feel like a suicide cluster? Does this feel like adolescent teenagers who are trying to figure out life? Or is there something else going on here? Let's take a look at some questions from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see what you have to say about this. And remember, we're being very, very sensitive to the families. We lost good people. We're losing a lot of good people in this country, and we've got to be sensitive to that. Okay, so let's make sure that we get over here to this question. I almost forgot about this one. John Halgreen says, listen, Rob, police fire suicide rates are higher than the general public. If individual organizations don't aggressively address mental health, one triggering event like a violent death, poor leadership, pediatric-related call can lead to these clusters. Many departments pay lip service and pencil whip mental health training, working 60 to 70 hours a week and being the targeted as the cause of our nation's problem is hard. Yeah, I agree with that. Police behavior, pensions, etc. No doubt the atmosphere inside the Capitol Police is poor. They are very likely as politically polarized as the rest of the country. There's no easy answer here. It's from John Halgreen. Right. I know, John, and this is why a lot of people have a lot of respect for public servants like police and fire, because they are sort of, in a heightened state of service that many of us are not in. Many other segments of society are just not in at all. And the latest iteration of society's appreciation for law enforcement, specifically police, is sort of in the toilet, right? We see that Democratic politicians, Democratic cities across the country are eliminating the police from their budgets, defunding them before trying to refund them, blaming the police for apparently not doing enough to eliminate systemic white racism or white systemic racism or whatever that was that they're trying to figure out in Portland yesterday. A lot of problems. And so you can imagine that if you put a stressor on somebody like January 6th and then you sort of, blame them for not doing a good job or something like that, that they may face a lot of public pressure, a lot of internal pressure, and they may choose a different path out of this world. That's arguably true, and I don't doubt that. I think that we got to be very careful to not ascribe something that's overly speculative here to this situation. And I'm not intending to do that, but I do think it's when you start to see a cluster like this, when you start to see something that stands out of you, this is a clear red flag. Something's going on here. And it might just be as simple as what you say, right? It might be as simple as they need more mental health training. Somebody should go check on them. Why is that not happening if that's the case? Or is there something else going on, right? And I hope not. I hope that's not the case. So that was over. Okay, let's see what else. All right, so I got to queue through some of these. Apologies, my friends. Give me a quick second to queue these up because I had to skip some of the questions from the last segment because we're slow on time. All right. Lot of Cuomo sexual harassment questions that I missed, and I apologize for that. But we are now here. We got Kenny 1B says, perhaps the pressure by Pelosi on these officers is so great to fib about their experience. Suicide is the result, right? And so, you got to be... I know. Let's see here. We got Sergeant Bob says, not to minimize the impact of suicide on families and friends, but having said that, police suicides are not uncommon. They happen frequently. Cops have problems like everyone else. Marital, romantic, financial, drugs, depression. I know a couple of people with PPB, one active duty and one retiree. Book Prince of the City about New York police corruption noted multiple suicides of officers who were about to be tried or imprisoned. I do not think January 6th was the proximate cause. Very interesting take there. Thanks for chiming in on that, Sergeant Bob. I was hoping you'd be listening in on the show today. So saying January 6th, I do not think January 6th was the proximate cause. That January 6th didn't lead to these suicides, right? And this is a very good point that you made and John made, that sort of suicides are up really across the board. Mental health is in a very, very poor state. If you're not familiar with this, they are, right? Suicides are up across the board. Addictions are up across the board. Overdose deaths are up across the board. I've been saying this for 18 months now, that by locking everybody down and by wrecking people's businesses and by taxing everybody to death and then by sort of taking away their personal autonomy and saying you just have to sit there like a caged rat and just get whatever the government hands to you, that causes people to not feel human. You slap on face masks and we have a bunch of people feeling dehumanized, and not able to associate with their friends and loved ones, watching everything that they had built sort of evaporate away right in front of their eyes. Yeah, it's a difficult time right now for many people. And you introduce some additional stressors on there. Yeah, it's not something that might be any more complicated than that. Thank you for that, Sergeant Bob. We have LT13 says, anyone reported to have 2 bullet holes? I read that one shot himself while driving and drove off a cliff. Sounds like a scene from the House of Cards. So we're gonna get 2 different perspectives on this one for sure. It's Ed says, sounds like Clinton might be involved. All joking aside, when it comes to the government, I wouldn't be surprised if something wasn't being covered up. Yeah, and I pinged a couple people on this space, and everybody's also sort of got some questions about the whole January 6th thing. Not just the suicides, but the whole thing. So Epstein didn't kill himself is here, says, the institutional media lies all the time. So I believe that 4 people dying by suicide is a bit too suspicious. Considering the event occurred near D.C., the deaths are used for political ends to justify the expansion of the security state. The police officer might have gotten suicide. Hashtag Epstein didn't kill himself. That's a morbid thought to think that way, but I really hope that's not the case. We have Soul Soul Viking is in the house, says suicide is horrible, tragic, and traumatic thing for families to carry with them forever. Even with the higher probability for suicide for close family and associates, what is the probability of 4 suicides in Capitol law enforcement? So sad for their families and friends. Me too, Soul Viking. It's awful. It's horrible. Shouldn't be politicized. Of course, they all have been politicized. All of these officers' deaths have been politicized. And I don't think that is appropriate. Sergeant Bob says maybe good cops there are put under political pressure and cannot take the assault on their integrity. Right? That's another outstanding point, Sergeant Bob. Right? Maybe they know something's up or something, and they just can't, or they're being threatened, or something's. It's 4. Quickly. Could be a suicide cluster. I don't know. We have Thunder 7 Rob. So sorry about your mother. Glad your mother is doing something positive. Pelosi, thanks for that, Thunder 7. My mom is amazing, an amazing woman. Now, needs to forget about another phony January 6th investigation. Do a thorough investigation into this and why 4 officers took their lives. Did they feel pressured? I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Let's take I forgot about, I saw some super chats come in. Let's take a quick look over here. Anything Goes says, years ago, I hung at a bar where the waitress would serve drinks out of her top. Should I hire counsel? That was on the Cuomo segment. I think you're good on that. That sounds consensual. I wouldn't worry too much about that one. Sounds like a fun time, actually. It's too bad I don't drink anymore. We have Beth Coddington says, Rob, please put this towards Eric's house. I will do that, Beth. Thank you for that. I will send that love over there as well. And thank you for very generous super chat for that, Beth. Thank you very much. Seriously appreciate that. I didn't see the amount there. That's a nice one. Thank you for that. That will go to good use. Amazing people over there. From Beth says, on a lighter note, President Reagan said that the 9 scariest words are, I'm from the government and I want to help. I say it's, I'm Governor Cuomo and I want to kiss you. So that is another one from Beth Coddington. Thank you for those, Beth. Back over to locals. Let's see what else we've got. John Delar, 52, is here. Says these suicides may be politicized, but how many cops killed themselves over all the other riots committed by Democrats over the last 4 years? You're just talking about the Capitol riots. Anyone researching suicide from other riots? Good question. Police have been treated with a lack of respect for the last 4 years, especially by Democrats, and the morale is terrible. Yeah, totally. And they're leaving. We heard that from Sergeant Bob yesterday, and a lot of good officers are just saying, fine, you don't want us to be in your city? You think I'm a racist white supremacist because I stopped the people who are shooting other people? Okay, well, good luck then. Why don't you deal with your gun violence on your own? We're going to go to a different state where we're actually appreciated. I support that wholeheartedly. And that was obviously going to happen. We were saying that was going to happen. If you keep demonizing the police, they're going to leave. Now they left. They're going, where are all the police? We don't know what happened here. Morons. Suburban Squid is here. So I hadn't heard that name before. Says, thank you for channeling your pain, healing, and all you've learned from your family's traumatic experience to help others. Thank you, Suburban Squid. Look, I think that's the only thing you can do, right? If you've suffered something like that, I don't know what else to do about it other than to talk about it and try to help somebody else with it. So I don't thank you for that. I don't think it's anything admirable. It's therapeutic for me to get some use out of it, Otherwise, it's like, what was that for? Why did we go through that? What is that all about? Now we can say, okay, right? We can help more people. So we'll do that. Greg Morat is here. Says the short allele of a 5-HTT-LPR lay dormant until something triggers it to possibly cause a suicide tendency within a person. Could a cluster be a grouping of these triggers? Somewhat genetically heritable. Well, I've never heard of that. The short allele of 5. Wow, I had not even. Thank you for that, Greg. Never heard of that. A genomic trigger that flips after. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a logical explanation. I don't know medically how accurate that is, but I'll take your word for it. We've got another one from Doodle Doo says, I'm very suspicious of these, quote, suicides. Maybe these officers didn't want to go along with the narrative and they got Epstein, right? And that's from Doodle Doo over at Locals. You don't want to think that way, but Realtor Patty says, do you think they might know something and someone is silencing them? So I'm not saying that, but I am sort of saying that without saying that, trying to be very clever about it. But yes, that's kind of what I'm saying, right? Is there something else that happened here? Are there other things that may have contributed to this? And I know that is even offensive to people who are suicide loss survivors. I know how offensive that is, but this is a national story. We have to talk about it. I do my very best to be respectful of the families and the lost officers and their loved ones, but we still have to talk about it. Kenny 1B says, the more I think about it, the more I think these officers know something and they're trying to cover them up, which is why they got suicided. All right, so McAfee didn't kill himself, another officer. Considering these officers are near people with power and with the political shenanigans, any witnesses might just get suicided. So if you work for people in power and witness a scandal, you might just get suicided. McAfee didn't kill himself. Epstein didn't kill himself. A lot of questions. Nadarb says, so Smith was driving down the road when he shot himself? When they said something like he was overlooking the Potomac River and he was parked there admiring the scenery beforehand or something. So they said he was driving, shot himself in the head. The Mustang careened over the road barrier into the side of the Potomac with his lunch on the way to work. Sweet Potato says, just wanted to say how brave you are for sharing your story, Rob. Sorry for your loss. My heart goes out to you. Thanks for sharing your wisdom on this topic. Thanks, Sweet Potato. I appreciate that. You know, it's a tough story. I've gotten into it in more depth in other shows, but I'm not emotionally prepared for that today. So we got Soul Viking says it can't be understated that many people who appear happy are truly, quote, suffering in silence. My heart goes out to their families. God bless them. Yep. Thank you for that, Soul. It's the right thing. God bless them. We got John Halgren says 228 officers died by their own hands in 2019. Yeah, and I'd be very curious sort of how much more than the average death or suicide rate would be, right? Officers versus the average rate in population. I'm certain that it's higher, but I wonder by how much. And if so, you know, are there any statistical models that would reveal these clusters? All right. We have Want to Know says, sorry, Rob, you did not convince me on this one. Most had too much to live for. Yeah. I'm not sure that I really took a position on this one. If I did, I was not trying to take a position on this, but I think there's some good questions here. I understand that being a police officer is very difficult, creates pressures for police officers. However, I don't know how I feel when they act as the Gestapo, so sympathy should be based on individuals instead of occupation. Considering dealing with the governments, there are always going to be cover-ups. Government should always be in cash. McAfee did not uninstall himself. Hashtag virus scan. Hashtag update your virus data. All right, and our last one on this segment looks like a good one from Three Girlies. Love the Three Girlies comments in the house. Let's see what this one says. Says, I have a master's in counseling, focusing on crisis response and trauma. You put in the idea of suicide clusters. It is possible that this could be suicide clusters, but I wanted to put in another idea. This could very well be more trauma-related. The overabundance of media focus on January 6th could only exacerbate a traumatic event for some of these people. Whether they were Capitol Police or DC Police or anyone who showed up that day, they dealt with a traumatic incident in their book, which is absolutely right? Many people can say, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. We weren't there. You don't know what they experienced individually. It would be good to know if we could see more of that video, but we don't have it. So we got to take them at their words, right? Traumatic incident in their book. That one event could have taken the trauma to a level that would not have been exacerbated but for the reporting and the commission. Okay, so now we have a but. Love this. So saying that maybe January 6th in and of itself would not have been enough, but that coupled with the reporting and the commission and all of the continued beating of the story, maybe that is what did it. It would not have happened but for everything combined. If you look at the Gunther Hashida, he was part of the emergency response team. He was called out on any kind of traumatic events. He could have had a pre-existing or long-term PTSD from his extensive law enforcement career. January 6th could have been his final straw. People who work in law enforcement, I want susceptible to PTSD and high levels of stress that lead to suicide, alcoholism, and drug abuse. Sadly, our police officers deal with a lot of traumatic issues. It's a great point. Thank you for that, Three Girlies. Very meaningful and substantive comments. I do appreciate that. And then lastly, from John Halgreen says, 4 suicides by police in that region lines up with the statistics. Sadly, this isn't an increase or all that unusual. There you go. Too many of my colleagues have chosen that path. 13 in 1,000 is the general pop versus 17 in 100,000 in police. So yeah, pretty close. I'm terrible at math, so I'm not sure what, so 13 out of 100 versus 17 out of 100, not insignificant. Great research on that from John Halgreen there. So maybe it's just a traumatic thing. Regardless, we lost four officers total by suicide. Not acceptable, not okay. Peace, hopefully, will find their families, and their families will find some comfort in the days, months, and years ahead, because it is a long journey. So thank you for all of those questions, all of your great support from watchingthewatchers.locals.com, and the super chats that came over from YouTube. Very much appreciate all of your continued support on the show. All right, in our last segment, we're going to fly through this one, but it's a good one. This is a little bit more fun than the last segment. That last segment was a little bit heavy. But now we're going to change gears because, oh my goodness, what's happening on Congress? On Capitol Hill, the congressional steps. This is a lot of fun. Okay, so let's go. The eviction moratorium. This was something that we've pointed out some time ago and said, hey, this moratorium is going to expire any day now. The CDC kept saying that if you are renting, if you're living somewhere and you can't afford to pay your bills, that's okay. Your landlords can't kick you out. CDC kept extending that. They said, no, another few months, no problem. Another few months, no problem. Another few months, no problem. Till the Supreme Court came out and said, hey, you're the executive branch. You don't get to say that anymore. If you want to continue these extensions, U.S. Congress has to do that. And so the useless U.S. Congress, of course, did not do that. They did not extend anything. And so now something like, 7 million people might be thrown out of their homes, allegedly. We'll see what happens. But our Congress people are trying to sort through this, and they're having a difficult time. So let's jump off from the AP. The White House now is calling on the states to prevent evictions. So this article came out yesterday, and the White House moved on Monday to pressure state and local governments to adopt new policies to protect renters, because the eviction moratorium expired, potentially pushing millions of Americans out of their homes. White House came out on Monday and said, hey, punks, it's not our problem, it's your problem. We already printed another $46 billion for you, and we gave it out to the states. So now you need to deal with it. And the White House accused the different states of being, quote, too slow to act. Oh, don't you hate that? So they're pretty good at this. Kamala Harris goes down to Guatemala and says, hey, Guatemalans, don't you come to the United States. Goes down to Mexico, does the same thing. Joe Biden goes over, talks to Putin over there in Russia and says, hey, don't hack our systems. And Putin goes, okay, whatever. Joe Biden comes back and he says, I gave him a list of the 10 most important infrastructure systems that I don't want him to hack. And he was feeling pretty good about that. So we're used to this. Now the White House is coming down and scolding the states. Hey, we gave you a bunch of the money that we printed out of thin air. You need to disperse it to the renters. Focus comes as Joe Biden faces stinging criticism, including some from his own party, that he was slow to address the end of the moratorium. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called to protect the widespread evictions unfathomable, called the prospect of widespread evictions unfathomable. And it's like, hey, dummies, we knew this was coming. We were talking about it here. I had to sort of marked on my calendar July 31st. That's the end of it, because it kept going on and on and on. And now Congress, we had no idea. This is unfathomable. We have Joe Biden says it's not our fault. It's your guys' fault. And so our federal government totally useless. And Congress is responding. Congressional Black Caucus then intensified on the White House issue. They want an immediate extension. One Democrat, Representative Cori Bush, who is sort of an amazing woman, as we're going to find out, she's been camped out in protest in front of the Capitol building. So this is what she looks like. This is Representative Cori Bush, and you can see here, I think this is from a couple days ago. TMZ was out there having a conversation with Miss Cori Bush about, her efforts. Let's listen in. Okay. So she's trying really hard. Let's help her out a little bit. So she says that, the Senate could pass something, and she's right about that. And so the Senate could easily pass a eviction moratorium extension. There's no question about that. They could, but that doesn't solve the problem. They also have to send that back over to the House of Representatives, which Cori Bush, that's where you actually work. You go in there and you vote in there. And so the Senate would have to send that back over to the House. And since the House is not in session because you've been evicted from the House of Representatives, and now you're a homeless person on the Capitol Hill steps, you would need your delegation, your leadership to reconvene. so that you could go and vote. So nothing's going to get done in Congress, obviously. The House is now gone. The White House is constitutionally prohibited from any of this because the Supreme Court of the United States says the extent of your executive power, White House, is limited. You don't get to do whatever the hell you want to do anymore. And so Cori Bush really, having a hard time out there, just trying to make something happen, doesn't really know how Congress works, says we got to do something. The House leadership could reconvene us. They could come back. There are people still here, by the way, anyways. And so she's struggling a little bit. And, it's really, this is close to home for her. In fact, she's so concerned about other people who are being evicted that she's identifying as also homeless, essentially. Here she is. So she knows what it's like to be unhoused, folks. You have a homeless congressperson out there. She's not wrong about this. She actually doesn't have a home. She got evicted from the House of Representatives. They are now on recess for August. And so she basically has nowhere to go. She's kicked out of the house. She got evicted. She's fighting really hard to make sure other people don't get evicted because she doesn't want them to end up like this. Here she is, folks. She's like a homeless person right on the steps of the Capitol building. It's so sad. Look how horrible this is. Do you want more of this? You want 7 million more people? This is Joe Biden's America, folks. Joe Biden's America out here. We've got Congress people literally homeless on the steps of Congress. And look how difficult. Look at this. I just feel terrible for her. Very, very sad. I hope she's staying warm out there. It's so hard. I know, it's the worst. So somebody put this video on YouTube. The Creature Comforts. And we're going to watch that one again. Poor Cori Bush. Oh, it's just so hard. And it's the Curb Your Enthusiasm music. You can feel it getting queued up. Bum 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 na 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 whoop bump na 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 na. Cori Bush likes her Oreos, and so she's going to solve the eviction moratorium crisis. All right, so she's hitting it hard. She's out there very aggressive. And she's going to be making sure that 7 million people don't get evicted. So, all right. What's the White House have to say about this? We're going to fly through this relatively quickly. Press Secretary Jen Psaki came out August 2nd, said the same thing, says thanks to the state eviction moratoria, almost 33% of the country is going to be spared evictions for the rest of the month. But in the remaining states, action is now needed. Thanks to bipartisan COVID relief, we've got $46.5 billion that are now out there. But even though funds began to be distributed in February by the Biden administration, too many states and cities have been slow to act, so they're not happy about that. Now listen to this language. As the administration made clear last week, there is no excuse for any state or locality to promptly deploy the resources that Congress made available. Do you see how they talk to you, state governors? This is how they talk. This is your White House. This is how they talk to you. Governors, state representatives, state attorney generals. This is your White House. They say, as the administration made clear last week, peasants, there is no excuse for your state or your locality to not promptly deploy the resources. Do you hear what I said? I'm Jen Psaki. I'm Joe Biden. We run everything. Do what we say or else face the consequences. From the DOJ. We have the assistance provides funding to landlords. No one in America should be evicted. Last week, the administration also made clear that given the spread of the Delta variant, Americans are going to face eviction. They're lacking in vaccination. The president has strongly supported CDC further extending that moratorium. Unfortunately, Supreme Court declared on June 29th that is not possible. So why then have they been twiddling their thumbs for the last month? Supreme Court came out. They wrote a very short opinion, not a 1,000-page memorandum like the Congress people need. Very simple. Here it is. Alabama Association of Realtors versus the Department of Health. Judge Kavanaugh, one of the more recent additions, says, I agree with the district court. CDC exceeded its existing statutory authority. CDC plans to end the moratorium in only a few weeks on July 21st. And because those few weeks will allow for additional and more orderly distribution of congressional funds, I vote to deny the application to vacate the stay of the order. In my view, clear and specific congressional authorization via new legislation would be necessary for the CDC to extend the moratorium past July 31st. So the Supreme Court, remember, we've got a system of checks and balances. The White House said, oh, well, we want to keep people in their homes longer. And they say, well, as a part of an executive branch like the CDC, we're going to just ask them to continue to grant that power. Supreme Court came out and said, that's fine. You can do that right now. But this is constitutionally problematic because the executive branch is sort of just passing legislation by saying that they're just going to indefinitely continue to extend these moratoriums. So they do that, and Congress is the appropriate entity that should make that permanent. Supreme Court said, that's fine for now, but not in the future. If you want to continue to do this stuff, you got to go get permission from Congress. That's their job. They're the people that do the legislation here, not you, executive branch. They make the laws, you enforce the laws. They didn't make a law about these executive extensions on eviction moratoriums. And so you are usurping their constitutional duties. Pretty clear. Not rocket science when it comes to constitutional law. So Congress should have then done something about that, and they didn't. So they left, they packed up their bags, they don't care about it, and they're just going to dump this back on the White House. The White House, they don't care about that, so they're just going to dump this back on the states. So given the rising urgency, they say, Rachel Walensky and her team, they can't find any legal authority for a new targeted eviction. So now we're going to redouble all of our efforts to see what we can do. So totally left hanging, right? Raise the prospect. Okay, here we go. The president now is taking additional measures. Number one, directing the White House policy, implementation and legal teams to figure out how to cram this through, calling on states and localities to implement their own eviction moratorium. And then the rest of the states should follow course. What else do we have? Directing the cabinet members to use their powers to prevent evictions and to tell landlords, if your government is backing your mortgage or providing you housing relief, you should not be choosing eviction over emergency rental assistance we provided to make you whole. So in other words, communicating to tenants to not leave and just go get that money from your states, challenging every landlord to hold off on evictions for the next 30 days. So if a landlord decides that we're going to evict somebody, well, they're going to challenge him, I guess. Challenge utility providers to also keep the power on. Directing the Treasury Department to make clear to states that they got to give the money out. All right. At the request of congressional leadership, they're going to direct the Treasury Department and other agencies to examine why state and local governments have failed to distribute rental assistance. Explore any other authorities the federal government has to press the states and localities to make distributions. The White House cares, blah, blah, blah. So it's all just about dumping it back on the states. It's really surprising. It's not surprising. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Governments are pretty useless at doing meaningful things. They created these massive slush funds for COVID relief funds, printed billions of dollars out of thin air without any real structure about how to disperse those funds or where it's going or what it's for. But they were all like piglets at a trough, just gobbling up all of the revenue. So we've got a bunch of printed money that just inflated everybody's dollars and drained your bank accounts. And I guess it's the state's fault that they printed too much money that the states don't know what to do with that for. So now the government, feds are going to come back down and scold the states now. Did you hear what we said? We rule you people. Abide by our orders. Forgot about the 10th Amendment, forgot about federalism and the state governments and federal governments. It's you do what we say, dang it. It's your fault. So pretty typical, not surprising. Now, the debacle continues on. This was taken this afternoon. Cori Bush is still addressing the attendees, still crying out there. Joyful tears, though. So she must still be good on her Oreo cookie stash. She's got a lot of them there. So, all right, let's take a look at some questions quickly from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We got a few that just came in, so we'll fly through some of these because I got a jet. 3 Girlies is here, says, that's on the last segment, so let me jump over that one. We have Sergeant Bob is here, says, I wonder how many would have been evicted during normal time statistically. This must be a significant factor in looking at numbers. Yeah, it's a good question. And I have a question about that too. It's how many people are actually back or past due on their bills? because the government was paying a bunch of people stimulus money. Were people using that stimulus money to pay down their rent, or were they using that for other things? All right. We have I'm Not Gas says, not a fan of this regime, but they are true in that the states have received millions of dollars for rental assistance, and most of them have failed to distribute it. I don't doubt that that's not, I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's true. Everybody has money. There's a lot of money all over the place because they printed bucket loads of it. My problem is that they don't, the government's very ineffective at all this stuff. They want to micromanage and solve all these problems for everybody. They're terrible at it. Markets are better at solving these things. The government can't go around to 7 million households and make sure you're okay. Did you pay your rent? No? All right, well, give him a stimulus. Give him some money. Did you pay your rent? Okay, you did good. Keep doing that. Okay, how about you? Did you pay? Why not? All right. For 7 million people. And the states are not going to be able to handle it. We're not set up for a redistributive system like this, where you just can print a bunch of money and just dole it out to whoever you want. Now, we're slowly transitioning into that, where we have a very robust system of redistribution, and that's kind of what they're upset about. They said, hey, we printed all this stuff. Why can't you give it out to people? Well, we're not set up for printing and giving a bunch of money out to everybody who wants it. That's why it's not working. We have another one says, I totally agree with AOC on this one. It's the Democrats' fault. I guess even a broken watch is right twice a day. They totally botched this. There's nobody to even blame on this. Jeremy says, if they are willing to sleep outside, they won't mind getting evicted. Just saying. As long as we keep them plied with Oreos. Well, then I think they'll be good. TOS Forever says, it's not just renters who got behind. My bills are ahead, and I paid bills not in my contract. Landlords are selling for bid prices over the locals' ability and working for no other rentals, building at over 200,000. I wrote affordable housing to prevent homelessness. That's from TOS Forever. Good to see you, TOS. We have a few more here. Want to Know says, can't fall out of bed with all the cookies and chips surrounding her. She's fortified. She might be cold, but she's not hungry. Thunder 7 says, but they have made sure that the illegals, many of them criminals, get hotel lodging and a food stipend, and they don't even have to take COVID tests. So that's very nice. John Delar, 52, is here, says, Nancy Pelosi didn't forget about the eviction moratorium running out. She didn't want to call a vote on it because she was trying to provide cover for all the conservative Democrats who didn't want to extend it. This was completely political. Of course it was. They are bouncing blame on each other, but no one is going to vote on anything that will cost them votes. Exactly right, John Delar. Totally political. Of course it is. Arnie B5 says, the Virginia General Assembly just started a special session this week, and one of the agenda items is to limit evictions if they're on unemployment or other hardships due to COVID. So the states are responding. Thanks for that info there, Arnie B5. Much appreciated. And then last one here is from Tweak, says, this is Marxist insanity for you. Providing people with rent-free living for months and the cutoff overnight, that's Marxist brilliance for you. And that's exactly right? They're not any good at redistributing things. They're terrible at all of this, which is why markets are a better solution. Great questions. All of those came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Very much appreciate all of those. You keep the conversation fun and lively, and I do appreciate it. I want to welcome some new people who joined us over there. We have CP565 is in the house. Welcome to the community. We have Lauren CS who signed up. Saw some comments from you, Lauren, as well. We have Boneless Ravioli is here. We have We have Vienticus Prime, or Ventitious Prime. Ventitious Prime, I think is how it is. Welcome, Ventitious Prime, CP565, and big one to Harry Wonderdog is now in the house, signed up for the year, and I very much appreciate that. If you want to join the community and join in on the fun, it's over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We have a monthly meetup taking place Saturday, August 28th, 2021 from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be a lot of fun. This is our fourth one. We have a great showing, and there's a lot of good reasons to sign up to support the show over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And that, my friends, is it for me for the day. I want to thank all of you who participated about it. And shout outs over to Vienticus Prime. I think I got it right the first time, and then I blew it. Vienticus Prime, shout outs. Farmer's Daughter, shout outs. Want to Know. We've got Three Girlies is in the house. Baranski, I see over there. Over on YouTube, we've got Ronnie Cole, Jenny B, Michael Palmer. Zulu Zeit is in the house. And we have another one from Martian Technologies, K Bean. Big thank you to the super chats that came in today from Anything Goes, Beth Coddington with doubles. Thank you to all of you for your support there. And that, my friends, is it for me for the day. I want to thank you so much for being a part of the show. We are going to be back here same time, same place tomorrow, 4 p.m. Arizona time, 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. on the East Coast, and for that one Florida man. Everybody else, have a tremendous evening. Good to see you, Chairman of the Board, and everybody else, have a tremendous evening. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.